Hi. So in this one, we'll continue on with talking about these different taboos in different cultures, focusing on different parts of the taxonomy. This one is going to be Appellity, then talking specifically about ancient Chinese taboos on naming. So these don't seem to be relevant today in modern Chinese, but at one time these were really strong taboos in the language. We'll start with a pronoun, zhen. Sorry, I'm going to butcher the language, so don't pay attention to my pronunciation of the words. But this first one is just a pronoun that means I. And the interesting thing about it is that it became adopted by the emperor, and once it was adopted by the emperor, it was decreed that it was taboo for everybody else to use. And so this was a really kind of a fascinating pronoun that could only be used by one person at a time, right, in all of existence. So as long as there's an emperor who's alive, then only that emperor can use it. Now, once the emperor dies and a new emperor comes into place, then that emperor can use it. But at any given time, there's only one person alive who can use that pronoun. I find that kind of fascinating. Now, in 1911, when China became a republic, the ban was lifted, and the word just kind of vanished. People thought, well, maybe the common people would start using it to kind of reclaim it, but no, that seemed to be too arrogant to claim this word, and so it just fell out of use altogether once there was no emperor to use it. Now, here's the one, though, that we're going to be focusing on, and this is a taboo on saying your father's name. And unfortunately, the article that I'm basing this off of focuses predominantly on writing, and that's just because of the records that exist from ancient Chinese. Of course, they're going to be more about written language than spoken language, but it seems that it was probably a taboo both on speaking and on writing. But it was taboo for a son to write his father's given name. So, for example, my father's name is Norman, and so it would have been taboo for me to even utter that name. Certainly taboo to say his name to him, which it is for me, actually, growing up. I grew up in a household where we did not call our parents by their first names. But it would have been taboo for me to even say the name in ancient Chinese, so I couldn't introduce him. Imagine I'm introducing him to a friend, as I would today, and say, hi, this is my father, Norman. I couldn't do that. That would be taboo. And then that idea got extended. So it became taboo for subjects of a state to use their sovereign's given name. And so the idea was, by extension, the sovereign, say the governor of a region, is kind of like the father of all of the citizens of that region, and so it was understood then that those citizens couldn't use his given name. And then the emperor Tianzi, the son of heaven, claimed to be the supreme person in the universe, and by that thinking, then he was the father of everybody, metaphorically, and so his name was too sacred to be pronounced in direct address or writing, and basically a euphemism had to be invented to refer to him, and not doing so was punishable by death. So this was not a lightly taken taboo. This was a serious taboo where if you were to actually say the name of the emperor, you could be executed. So each character then within the name of within the emperor's name also became taboo. So this requires a little bit of understanding of how Chinese writing works. So rather than being based primarily on pronunciation, as for example in English and European languages, where each letter represents a sound, in Chinese, it's more based on the semantic side. So remember, we've talked about this difference between form and meaning. And so in Chinese, the writing system focuses on the meaning side, whereas in English and the other European languages, it focuses on the sound side. And so those characters in the writing system represent different meanings within the word. And so the idea was then that each character, the form part of the emperor's name, became taboo. And so, for example, in the Han Dynasty, Emperor Liu Zhu had a word for pheasant in his name, and so a new word had to be assigned to pheasant, yeji, wild chicken became the new word for pheasant because you couldn't see the emperor's name. Think kind of an analogy in English where we're more focused on the sounds. Imagine that, again, going to my father's name, Norman. Well, that would mean then that any part of that sound, like norm, would be taboo for me. So then I couldn't say words like normal or normative. That would be forbidden for me to say as well. All right, so the thing is that, as you can imagine, this got to be pretty onerous, right? So they had to make certain rules so that they could just function in society, because the rules were piling up on each other and getting more and more complicated. And so they started instituting rules to make it simpler. So one was that only the given name, not the surname, was taboo. Well, that makes sense, right? So, like, imagine that your governor's name is Smith, right? So only their first name, John, say John Smith, only the name John would be taboo, not Smith. And then they went further. If a given name has 2 characters, only one of them is taboo, and then the taboo can't exceed 7 generations. Well, 7 generations is a lot of generations, but to keep track of. So imagine then that would mean that I would have to know. I'm not sure I'll be able to do the math in my head, but I would have to know my father's 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 name and know not to say that name. Here's a kind of an interesting anecdote. There was this scholar writer who was pretty accomplished. His name was Han Yu. Again, I'm not pronouncing this anywhere close to right, but he was a candidate for an honorary title, Jinshi, but the problem was that he was denied it because Jin sounded too much like a character in his father's name, so it sounded similar or looked similar enough that it was basically declared that because he wouldn't be able to say the honorary title he was being given, that they couldn't award it to him. So basically, he was denied this title that he clearly deserved. Okay, that does it for this one. And I thought it was just kind of a nice illustrative example of just how strong taboos on naming can be. The Chinese data was taken from this article by Huang Hongshu and Jiang Guisun, a sociolinguistic view of linguistic taboo in Chinese.